Hello and welcome back to Forza Motorsport, and in this video we're going to be talking about a couple of different things, but mainly whether or not it is worth actually picking up, and also some of the issues that have been prevalent in the community as of late. And we're going to be doing this across the time span of a typical online race involving practice, qualifying, and the race itself. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. Topic number 1. Single player versus multiplayer. Now, why do I phrase it like this? Why do I say single player versus multiplayer as opposed to saying, say, for example, single player and multiplayer? I phrase it this way because while there are a lot of people that will play both, there are some that are probably just going to get their hands on the game and play maybe just one or the other, or some kind of combination of the two. Maybe that's 20 or 30% single player, but like 70 or 80% multiplayer. Now, I find myself to be in the category of spending 70 to 80% of my time in the multiplayer and not really playing all that much single player, because the single player campaigns of a lot of the Forza games haven't really been all that appealing to me for a decent amount of time now. Now, I started playing the Forza Motorsport series back in Forza Motorsport 2, and while number 2 was still probably my favorite, even after Forza Motorsport 4, which is kind of the pinnacle of the series for a lot of people, Forza Motorsport 2 still has a really special place in my heart and in my mind. Now, in terms of the new Forza Motorsport, I really like what they've been doing with the new penalty system. I really like what they've been doing with the new like tire types, refueling, things like that. I think these are really good dynamics, and I also like the way a lot of the cars feel. Now, in particular, the touring car racing that you're seeing on screen right now is especially good and especially entertaining. I love how these cars feel to drive. And by the way, if you want a really fun car for this particular series, get the GTI. The GTI is an absolute powerhouse in this class. It is a beast, and it's also, just in general, really, really fun to drive. But back to the prior topic about single player and multiplayer, I personally find this game to be a lot more fun and entertaining in the multiplayer dynamic than the single player. And the reason for that is because I feel like the single player ends up being a little bit more on the, not necessarily to say grind is bad, but I think it ends up being a little bit more, it feels more grindy, because for me, I find a lot more entertainment in racing against other real people as opposed to racing against AI. And I think, running against the AI, while it is, fairly good in some scenarios, like for example, when the racing is spread out, there are some areas where when the AI gets bunched up together, it can get a little bit iffy and a little sketchy. And on top of that, there are also just some parts of the single player that can feel like a decent amount of grindiness. And that's not to say there isn't grind in the multiplayer as well, but I feel like in the multiplayer, I find myself thinking about that grind a lot less, and I find myself being able to level up cars a lot quicker without paying attention to the fact that, oh, I need to upgrade to this level to unlock this part, because I find myself caring a lot more about the actual racing, because with the way they've incorporated all of the new dynamics and penalty systems and things like that, it definitely helps tone down a little bit of the chaos that has definitely plagued the online of Forza Motorsport in the past, and really Forza in general. But I definitely think that I will be spending more time in the multiplayer than in the single player as the life of this game goes on. And now, yay, we get to talk about the car leveling system. So this is either a part of this game that you love or a part of this game that you despise, based on what I've seen out in the community and a lot of the various reactions that I've gotten from people. There have been people that say they actually really like the new car leveling system, and they say it really just actually deepens their connection with the car, and they feel as though once they've built the car that they want, that they've got a little bit more experience and connection with it than they may have had before. Whereas you have people that have also said in my comments that the car leveling system makes them not want to buy the game in its entirety. And while the car leveling system is definitely not a deal breaker in terms of the entire game, in my opinion, I will say that I am not the biggest fan of it itself, like as a system. And the reason I say that is because there are times when I would actually enjoy the progression and I'm like, oh, I'm not really having any issue with this system. But then there's other times where I just want to go in and see how a specific car would perform with a specific engine swap, or I just want to get creative with customization. And then you end up hitting a wall where you just can't do that. And so that's that's where those elements kind of interact with each other. And so there are some times where I think it's fine, and there are other times where I don't like the system. And I wonder if there's potential in the future for maybe a happier medium between customization creativity being accessible, and also for those of you that really do want to retain just that long-term grind, having access to that as well. So I can see multiple sides to that and the leveling system for the cars, and I'm very back and forth about it, but I don't think it's game-breaking whatsoever, but it's not my favorite system. And that brings me to topic number 3, bugs, glitches, and the future. Now, when I say bugs, glitches, and the future, what I mean is bugs that are prevalent right now, glitches that are prevalent right now, and the future of the game should these end up being addressed. Because honestly, I have no doubt that these will be addressed in time. Now, does this game have issues? Yes, it does. It has issues in spaces like, for example, some systems having performance issues. Well, I should say some systems, PC in particular, having some performance issues, even with settings dramatically reduced on some PCs. There are also people that have reported constant disconnection issues from online races. There have been people that have reported cars being miscategorized in the wrong classes. There's a lot of different elements with this game that a lot of people are having some issues with. However, I am sure those issues will get ironed out. Now, what I'm more curious though about in terms of this game's future is, does it have the user base to continue to build and grow off of the foundation that it has laid as of right now? And I say that because even though there are a lot of people on the game right now, I mean, obviously around launch, there is going to be that interesting dynamic of watching what this game does in its post-launch cycle, because the developers did say that this game was going to be based on a more long-term building and improving upon the platform that they've laid out kind of approach, as opposed to, games that will release a new one every 1 or 2 years or so. And I think that the long-term evolution style approach is definitely the approach I like to see, because you can lay your groundwork and then you can build from there. The only time that becomes an issue is when, say, for example, a large part of the player base gets used to a certain element of the game that ends up getting changed later on down the road in a way that the community doesn't like. Now, obviously, that's not where we're at with it right now, but I think it's important to note what certain parts of the community are focusing on versus what other parts of the community are focusing on, because I see a lot of people that are, say, for example, very focused on the customization side of the game, or rather the series. I see a lot of them focusing on their dislike for the leveling system, and I also see them focusing on their dislike for the car models, which, sure, there are some elements to the car models that maybe aren't exactly the best, but you see some other parts of the community that are a little bit more into the competitive side and the online racing side enjoying the penalty system, so long as they don't get mispenalized. And I think that over time, if they evolve that penalty system in the right way, those mispenalty situations should hopefully be avoidable, because I have seen some reports of people getting run into by aggressive players, and then they themselves end up being the one that gets penalized. Now, I haven't really had all that much issue with the penalty system online. As a matter of fact, there's really only been one scenario where I felt like I may have been mispenalized, and that was a scenario where I got bumped by another driver, pushed off the track, and then I was given the penalty for going off track. Now, see right here, though, they made a massive lunge, and it was a collision, but it calculated it for me as no penalty. And I think that if I go back and watch the footage again, I'm pretty sure that the player that did that ended up incurring a penalty of their own. So that's a scenario where the penalty system worked as intended. And I really think the biggest thing with a lot of this stuff is we're gonna have to see how it turns out over the long term and how the community adjusts to it, as well as the elements of the game that the community maybe says, no, we don't like this, and that's just that, and you're either gonna fix it or we are going to, just not use this part of the game, or maybe end up playing something else because that ended up being, almost a game-breaking part to them. And that brings me on to topic number 4, current state of gameplay, because realistically, we can only judge the game based off of what its current state of play is, and at least that's how I look at it, right? I'm not necessarily going to try to judge the game on elements of it that have not happened yet, or, supposed updates later on down the line that haven't been implemented yet. So with that in mind, I think the state of gameplay right now is good. I think it's very, very good in certain scenarios, but at the same time, I also think that there are things that definitely need to be addressed, and I think they should be addressed sooner rather than later. And I think one of the big ones is cars ending up in classes that they maybe shouldn't be in. That is a bit of a big one. But also multiplayer connectivity issues that I have had some trouble with myself, where even though my internet connection will remain completely stable, I will do 1 or 2 races online, and then I will lose connection to the game's servers and be placed into an infinite loading loop that will only really allow me to back out of multiplayer, quit the game, load it back up, and then immediately I can go back into another multiplayer session again. Now, I have also had a couple of instances of freezing, but those have been very, very uncommon. Those have been a lot less common than the multiplayer connection issues, and really, the multiplayer connection issues are the only real major performance issue that I have had with the game in really across the board. Now, as far as what I am running the game on, I am running the game on PC, and I'm running it through a GTX 4070 Ti. It's not the greatest card, but it's also not a terrible card at all whatsoever. I also ended up skipping to the end of this race because, I'm not gonna lie, the last couple of laps, I was kind of just sitting by myself in second place, and not much happened until this Focus got up behind me, and I kind of got spooked, got thrown way off my line, went into the dirt, and basically the Focus walked away with it and took second place for me, but that was kind of entirely on me. But if y'all enjoyed this video and you want to share any and all of your thoughts and opinions, let me know in the comments down below. And until the next one, I will see y'all later.